But what's happening in their bodies, right? What's going on over time? Mike also called out how difficult it can be to include longitudinal work in different contexts. And so we wanted to make sure we weren't just looking at beginning and end, but also how things continue over time. And you can see what we would want to see with all of these indices is that their HRV is going up over time, that their capacity to flexibly adapt to their environment is improving over time. And that is, in fact, what we see. And these are statistically significant improvements. I know they look kind of small on the graphs. This is the thing about science, is sometimes incremental change is very important. And especially with a measure like RMSSD, even a small increase is associated with health increases. So this is, thank you for that. This is a measure of how much your heart rate is changing over time. And the important part is that it's kind of a proxy measure for how your whole nervous system is able to flexibly adapt to your environment. So when it's very low, that's telling us that you're maybe under quite a bit of stress. You might be more rigid and not able to adapt the same way, as opposed to a higher score is going to indicate that you're able to more flexibly engage. And something that's also really important to know is that these are indices that are tightly associated with all-cause mortality and morbidity. So these are great indicators of someone's overall health. And at the start of these programs, we were seeing 20-year-olds with HRV measurements that you might see in an 80 or 90-year-old in a Western context, right? Or in an industrialized context. And we saw that change over the course of this program, that people's HRV was rising, their capacity to adapt to their environment was improving. This is my most numbers heavy slide, and I'm so sorry, but what I wanted to really make sure was clear to you is that even when we consider all of these demographic and contextual factors, the things that matter the most are the mentorship period, having this ongoing support, that we don't just drop in, provide an intervention, and bounce, right? But that we're working with people who are already embedded in their communities, who are already doing this work. We're providing them with extra resources and support, and we're continuing to do that over a longer period of time. Okay, so for the sake of time, I want to show what happened in another context. So being able to recontextualize, use the GTP model to develop a program in a different country, targeting a different experience of chronic trauma. So the Nawiri project, based in Kenya, was focused on addressing gender-based and sexual violence in communities in Kenya. So there were parts that were similar. There were training and mentorship periods. The program focused on training people who were already, once again, healers, leaders, and community members who were doing this work, who could bring this training back. But this time, the psychoeducational training was largely focused on, again, emotional regulation, but also gender equity and reducing aggressive behaviors. So in this case, the key demographics and contextual factors were, again, age and sex and gender. And once again, I also still care about the artifact filter strength, so I have to put it on here to be a good scientist, but you might not care so much, and that's okay. So once again, we were interested in PTSD symptoms. We wanted to understand, were people reporting symptoms that mapped onto our kind of understanding of what happens when we experience chronic trauma. But we were also interested in depression symptoms and attitudes towards gender equity, aggressive behaviors that were being enacted, and violence that people were experiencing. And then once again, we were looking at this HRV, understanding someone's body, what's happening there. Oh, a question?
Just in the prior slide,
yeah.
Are the acronyms things they use to measure?
Yeah, these are scales that we use to measure. I have on there in case people want to look them up or see what they were, but Yes, absolutely. So once again, we're looking at age by site, and we have people generally in the same age band, though this sample was a little bit younger. And when we look at percentage of female participants by site, we actually see an increase in the percentage of female participants in this program, which makes sense, bless you, given the focus on gender equity. Okay, so when we look at some of our key outcomes, pre and post intervention, we see that people endorsed using fewer aggressive behaviors after participating in the program as they did when they were before they had participated. And this was, again, a statistically significant difference. And we also saw people report attitudes associated with more gender equity over time from pre and post. So we saw these kinds of interventions focused on regulation and focused on understanding cultural norms start to kind of move the needle in this way. We also saw a significant drop in depression symptoms from pre to post, where people were reporting significantly less depression after participation in the program. And once again, we saw a significant reduction in the number of people who were reporting PTSD level symptoms, so diagnostic meeting criteria level symptoms of PTSD. But lastly, and this is the one that is so exciting to me, again, as a physiologist, is we saw a huge jump in people's HRV, their ability to flexibly adapt, a huge jump in their overall psychobiological stress levels from beginning to end. Just as a note, this kind of improvement in a single program is like kind of unheard of. It's very rare to see this. And when we saw this, we were so excited to see this. So just to close, we wanted to show that there was, when we also looked at what people described as most useful qualitatively, what they told us they liked the most, they, 45% of participants in an overarching program described the group trauma healing sessions, which were run by GTP using this TICE model, as the most useful intervention that they experienced during this time. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Ilya to talk more about what this model actually does. Thank you.
Mayon, thank you so much to both Mike and Ellen. They say things that I absolutely have no idea how to say, because I'm not a scientist. I am a clinician who's worked in communities and a lot with translating stuff that I don't understand into stuff that I can understand. And I often say to Wendy, she tells me these things, and both my colleague and I, we say to her, you need to talk to us like we're 5. 5 years old, that's the level, and still, 10 years later, 15 years later, we still need the 5-year-old program. And I think that's fine, and that's good, and that's all we need. So, and you'll see why that's important. I just want to say, because I also think it is kind of, I don't know, important, that I've just come off of a significant medical leave. And I haven't presented anything for a long time. And I'm nervous. Thank you. Thank you so much. That support means a lot. And it also makes me think about all the people that we work with who don't ever get chances to come to a place like this or any place and to share about their lives and to share about their work, because they're working in incredibly difficult contexts, have the most incredible experiences, and don't get to share it, don't get to talk about it. And often, sometimes if they do, they also feel like me in this moment. So yeah, I think that's important to say, and it just creates in me, again, this huge amount of empathy for everyone that we work with. And I think that the empathy is such a key part. It's just such a key part. So GTP has been working alive since 2013. And since then, we have operated in 7 countries. We've been able to get services at large to around 40,000 people. And we've shown overall an 87% improvement in well-being scores, meaning across all of the different things that Ellen has talked about. And we, in the places where we work with a lot of different partners. And I'll mention something about those today, because it's not GTP that does this. It's the partners and it's people in community that do this work. So even when you guys are talking about the intervention, the model, in a way I kind of cringe a little bit, because to me it kind of feels like that's this thing, and the work that we do, we try to kind of get away from that thing. And I'll say more about that. So this is an example. This is part of one of our teams of people that have graduated from the TICE and TICM training program that I'll say more about. But in terms of when they're talking about multiplying the amount of providers that we're needing, especially in hard-to-reach areas where there isn't much of anything that exists, this is how we go about doing it. We have to train a lot of people and who can offer a lot of support. So as they're saying, it's like we kind of are trying to make this bridge between, on one hand, all of these great things that we're learning about here, or that we've learned about through our studies and that are presented here at the trauma conference, right? A lot of rigorous science, proven treatments, are evidence-based, trained professionals, right, that have some kind of background or license and can say, I'm qualified, and here's how and why we know that. Standards and quality, and having a lot of resources often, and systems that support healthcare, basically. And then we have the other side of the coin, where we have a lot of communities around the world, even in the US, even in Boston, where care doesn't reach very well for a variety of other reasons. That there can be very high needs in those locations, that there's very limited access to maybe services themselves, maybe people can't get to them, maybe there's not enough people for providing them, and maybe they're not relevant. So even if you do get them, it's like you don't really want to go. It doesn't really feel good or make sense. There's systemic barriers that we can also talk about. Systems that are not set up and in place, or that sometimes are going against or working against the kinds of healing initiatives that are needed. There can be very low resources and not much being put in, not an investment or really seeing that this is something that's important. And there can also be kind of a cultural or context disconnect, again, between the kinds of things maybe that we're seeing here and what could really go over well and work in a lot of different places. So Mike, when you're talking about, I look out there at all of these, like the tech things and whatever, and I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. We're not going to work with them, although we are working on HRV measurement. And I will say that when we pull that out, just because we're trying to study and understand something, and something that's not just self-report, we kind of wondered in different settings, how is that going to go over? Are people going to be afraid of it? You know, you're hooking something to you. It seems kind of weird. And every place that we've done it, every single person wants to do it and is super excited about it and fights to get to be the first one to do it, and then comes out of there saying, you know, either I'm really good or I'm really horrible. You know, and it's kind of like this validating thing of my stress is so high that, you know, I need the most, right? And so people are really happy and excited, and even me too, when I do it, I'm like, oh gosh, look at what's happening here. So I guess it's not a surprise, but it's kind of neat that I think people across the board, we want to learn things about ourselves. And we want to learn, yeah, what's healthy, what's good for me, where am I at? And so that's nice. So we really are focused on getting supports that are locally led, that are culturally grounded, and that are contextually adapted so that they make sense, they're helpful to people, and so that we can get the kind of outcomes that we remarkably are seeing. And even when I hear you guys still talk, I still feel like I want to cry. Actually, I still do cry when I hear about some of this, because you know, we all hope, I think all of us hope that what we're doing is making a difference. That's why we do it. And it's hard sometimes to do things that really make a difference. Sometimes you feel like, am I really making a difference? And so to see some of this and in some of the places and areas that we're working in, it just really touches me a lot. So we want to share about it. And we want way more people to be doing great work and in places where it's even most needed. Let's see. We were supposed to have a video here with my wonderful colleague Dow, and the video got screwed up. So unfortunately, we're not even able to hear from him. So I'm going to skip that one, but Dow is an incredible trainer, facilitator. He works both in South Sudan and Kenya, and is a theater performer and runs theater programs for youth in conflict areas and youth that are combatants. And using this framework, has integrated that into his theater programming and through different kinds of initiatives in the program and in his programs with very good success. So it's also, we're kind of seeing how the framework that we're going to talk about can be used in so many different ways. So the TICE framework, which is standing for Trauma-Informed Community Empowerment, was developed from a number of places. The primary thing, if anyone here knows about ARC, from my wonderful colleagues, Margaret Blaudstein and Christine Kinnenberg from the Trauma Center. And what I loved about ARC initially, fantastic, is that it's a flexible framework. It's not a treatment model. It's not a specific thing. It's looking at when there's these kind of concepts, in this case, that affect parents and children and with developmental trauma, what are the core things that we need to look at and to try and address? And then we can create a ton of different things to do that. So I was a trainer in ARC, loved it, using it all over the US, seeing really great results, and find it incredible. If anybody works with ARC, I think you know this. And so, you know, I had an interest in how can we take something like ARC, like this kind of framework, and kind of use it or adapt it or change it to apply to different kinds of populations and settings, not just parents and kids with developmental trauma, in particular in more Western contexts. Can I have that water? Thank you. Thank you. Also pulling from things like internal family systems and ego states, parts work, sensory motor, psychotherapy and different kinds of embodiment-based practices, neuroscience and the nervous system regulation, all different kinds of culturally grounded healing practices from all over, many different communities, and also working on some initial piloting with my wonderful friends and people at ERCMED in Addis Ababa, who was founded by a dear friend of mine, Tigist Waltinigus. So that's some of the kind of background of where this is coming from. So GTP is kind of working with two main parts. So one is a model called trauma-informed change-making, trauma-informed change-making, and the other is a framework called trauma-informed community empowerment, or the TICE model. They're two different things, but they are important together. So on TICM, this is a leadership and implementation model. This is where we primarily work with leaders of whatever kind and look at how to develop and structure and implement trauma-informed, healing-centered initiatives in a wide variety of different contexts. So often people that are interested in it, maybe because of their work or something, what they're doing, they're interested and they want to do it, but haven't done it. So how do you go about doing something like that, especially in a place where there isn't much, and you're trying to make it work? And two things, you're trying to make it scalable, because we want to reach a large number of people with not many resources, and we want to make it sustainable as much as possible when there's low resources. These are not easy things to do. They're not easy things, in particular the sustainability part. Where are we at? Oh my God, okay. Then I'm gonna go really quick. So that's what TICM is. TICE is a flexible framework to be used for actually developing different kinds of interventions that you will use with people. And the things that you guys have presented on is a particular intervention that was developed using this framework, where people said, we really need something concrete to do right now. We can't use the concepts to develop everything. We want to use a group healing model where we meet with groups of people, we train people to meet with them, and we're going to meet over time. I will say that has looked different in different places. So how long the sessions are, sometimes it's been 10, like you had talked about in one of them. Sometimes it's been as little as 5. Sometimes they go weekly, sometimes they go twice a week, sometimes they go every other week. So this is also something that not a lot of times people like to study, because it's like, well, this is very variable. It's too hard. Well, and we say, too bad that's how it's going to be, because that's what people need and want. Okay, so I'm gonna try to go quick. So the TICE framework is made up of 6 core concepts. This is safety, regulation, connection, identity, empowerment, and joy. And we say that these are the things that trauma and stress are fundamentally affected in these domains across humanity. As human beings, these are the ways we get affected, at least some of them. But how those things look and what we need to do with it can be very different in different contexts. So that's the part. The core concepts remain the same, but what we do with it, how we understand it, those are the things that are specific and that need to be contextualized. And in the center here, we have a part that's about self-healing. So this is about the individual part of healing that we need to do personally, and surrounded on the outside by this community context and community care. Because this work, as so many people at this conference have all said, cannot typically, it's not something that happens just alone. Most of the trauma that we're talking about, it happens at the hands of other people, with other people. It's relational, and the greater healing is critically important that it also happen relationally. I'm going to cut short on the other parts because we have to play Anne. So Anne is going to talk a little bit about contextualization now of those concepts and how that looks in different places. So is it going to play? Do I need to hit something? Okay, hit the clicker.
So I'll now take you through why contextualization matters and how TICE co-creates scalable healing. Because every community is unique, we contextualize the TICE framework to fit specific cultures, local context, realities, and environments. This makes the concepts to be practical and easy to use for local caregivers and providers, so they are able to deeply understand them and own them. When the TICE framework speaks to their language and reflects their context, they can create local responses that are effective to the local context in which they live in. So we contextualize the TICE framework with community stakeholders to co-design trauma healing initiatives that reflect the local context, local languages, local cultures, belief systems, community structures, and the existing coping mechanisms. We come into communities as partners, and this means we bring the 6 TICE components of safety, regulation, connection, identity, empowerment, and joy as a shared language. So together with communities, we explore what these universal well-being needs look like in their context. For example, what does a safe space look like in this community? What does safety look like to a woman in this community? What does empowerment look like for a youth in this community? So communities can then start adapting simple tools such as metaphors, stories, and practices which resonate with them. So this co-creation approach, it makes the healing work to be scalable, and it makes the TICE model to remain relevant across topics, cultures, and locations. So the 6 components are not tied to a single issue. They are usually fundamental human experiences that show up, whether we are working in healthcare, education, peace building, violence prevention, livelihood, or leadership programs, or almost any field. The framework can be contextualized. It bends to the context. And this is what makes the TICE framework very, very unique. For example, the pain of trauma looks very different in a refugee camp, in a school setup, in a work setup. However, the need for safety, the need to reconnect, the need for healing, the need to recover a sense of identity and hope, these are universal. And so that is what makes the TICE framework to be very, very flexible and to be adaptable into local context. I'll share with you one of our contextualized tools. We call it the Sticks and Bricks poster. So this has been contextualized to coastal communities in Kenya. And basically we use it to check the levels of stress that we are carrying in our body. We use it as a check-in. We use it to check in with ourselves in terms of when we look at across this continuum from number 1 to 4, what stress levels are we carrying? So what we will ask is, what is the level of sticks or bricks that you're carrying? Yeah. And how do you know? How can you tell? Notice your thoughts, your feelings, your body, your actions. What is it that happens? And how do you know that you're at a 3? Or how do you know you are at a 4? And what is one thing we can do to shift, to reduce our sticks and bricks? So the reason why we use the image, for example, of a woman carrying firewood, that resonates well with our rural communities in Kenya. And a man also carrying bricks resonates well with our local communities when they are doing a lot of construction. So this is a simple tool, but we use it with communities to check in on our own well-being and on our own stress levels. So TICE offers a very flexible, dignified pathway for communities to be able to transform trauma into collective well-being in their own terms. Thank you.
I'm just showing here quickly a couple other contextualizations. The boat there is a way of talking about trauma and compounded stress that we've used on the coast in fishing areas where we're working on climate change, trauma related to climate change. There's the backpack one was contextualized for a community in Florida in the US. The market basket is one that is contextualized again with talking about trauma and compounded stress. And it's one where I think I lost some of my stickers here, but we have little stickers that get put on here because people also came up with when you have a basket like this and you take it to the market and you're putting all of your stuff, and it starts to tear, and slowly there's little tears. It's still okay, but there's little tears. And then slowly there may become to where there's some big hole, big gap, and now you can no longer carry anything, right? What are the things that can happen? Oh, okay, when there's a little tear, we can stitch it up. We can do some like small repair. When there's a big, huge gap, has anybody ever done anything that can repair this big, huge gap? Yes, actually, it can be lined with this more layers of fabric on the inside, and actually, it can even become more beautiful, which you'll see if you know some of these baskets, how they become so nice. Wow, there's a way that we can, even these big holes, these big traumas, can actually be healed and even become something more beautiful in us because they change us in a way that can make us even stronger and even more empathetic or more resilient. So this is, so these are designed with talking with people about what do things look like and what might work. I'm gonna show, I think I'm slowing down on our activity because I want you to see this stuff and I want you to hear again from Anne. Anne is now talking about a specific contextualization specifically.
So working with communities to contextualize their stories using the TIES framework is an eye-opening process of listening and co-creation. An example of contextualization comes from our work from an intimate partner violence project in coastal Kenya in Kwale County. During the contextualization process, we realized that the concept of intimate partner violence was viewed as a foreign concept by the communities and so did not resonate well with them. So community members explained that the word intimacy to them implied love, emotion, connection, or personal choice. However, according to them, many relationships in the local context were shaped by forced marriages, child marriages, economic dependency, religious expectations, family obligations, or cultural pressure, where intimacy or choice may not exist. So communities also shared that violence extends beyond husbands and wives. Women describe being abused by their mothers-in-law, their fathers-in-law, their co-wives in polygamous relationships, and extended family members within communal living settings. In this context, the term partner violence felt more accurate and culturally relevant to them than intimate partner violence. So using the TIES framework, we then worked with communities to explore these realities through the 6 TIES components. For example, in safety, we asked, what makes women feel unsafe in their homes or in relationships? And women described that safety is affected by many interconnected factors, not just physical violence. They cited things like economic dependence, sexual violence, emotional humiliation, or fear of bringing shame to the family. And many women also spoke about feeling unsafe because they lacked privacy, they lacked voice, or decision-making power within households. In identity, we asked what messages do women receive about their value and how do these experiences shape how they see themselves? And so women shared that they receive messages that their value is tied to their ability to maintain a marriage, to tolerate hardship, to obey their husbands, to bear children, and to preserve family honor. So women who experience things like divorce, separation, infertility, or conflict were often blamed, stigmatized, or viewed as failures. So over time, these experiences can deeply affect the self-identity and the self-worth of women. So many participants began believing the violence was their fault or that they deserved mistreatment. So through the TIES framework, for example, we started exploring what do healthier coping strategies look like. For example, emotional awareness, doing breathing and grounding exercises, and having peer support systems. We started exploring what does safety in a household look like in the coastal community. So, for example, many women shared that they turned to either community members, the church leaders. They also turned to people like the local chiefs, community health workers. And they felt that having a safe space outside the home where they could talk about their issues would be a good way to engage in safety issues. So what makes this process powerful is that communities themselves get to redefine the language, the meanings, and the pathways to healing. And they adapt the TIES tools within the local context using their local metaphors, their experiences, their stories, and their cultural practices. So the TIES components become locally owned tools that communities can use to better understand trauma, to strengthen relationships, and support healing. Thank you. So,
Okay. How much time do we have? 5 minutes. Okay, then maybe we'll just think for a moment. So I want to say that in terms of the people that are trained to deliver this kind of support, people always say, oh, what kind of the people that we most look for are the people that are trusted, basically the people that are trusted. So whoever that might be, it could be a youth from a youth center, it could be a grandmother somewhere, it doesn't have to be anybody that's been trained in anything related to health, mental health. They're the ones that people are already going to, and so they are the perfect ones to do more. That being said, I think an important part maybe of the mentorship, ideally longer term, and so that's about building in the structures, is that those providers are so also heavily burdened with everything everybody's bringing to them, and they're going through all of their own stuff in the same context, that often their levels of their symptom levels and things are even higher than the people that they're working to support. So I think this aspect of really the care for the caregivers, I mean, is just really important, just to reiterate that. So afterwards, if people have questions, if they want to see more about tools or contextualizations or things like this, I'm happy to stay here or there or whatever and share and show things. We'll do one quick thinking, but also to say we need to have so many more folks doing great work around the world, like I said, and with whatever, however you're going about it. But GTP is working now to try and expand the reach that we're having to train more providers to be able to do this in different communities. We've normally always done this work in person heavily, and it costs a lot to do that. So we will be changing also to do some online programming now. We have information out that later. But the reason for that is to create a greater global community of folks who are doing this very contextualized work with great success and great impact. So lastly, I'd like you just to think for a moment, because a lot of times I think what we talk about are all of these great interventions and the evidence-based stuff from the West, and how can it now be brought to the non-West and used and studied. And we've done this sometimes where we've talked about this here, even in Boston. And I think because folks have seen these images and heard the stories of Eastern Africa, where we've been normally working, and people have said, this isn't for us. This is something for Africans. And I really want to challenge everybody, because we need to be able to go both ways. We need to all be able to learn from each other, and not that we need, we should be. I mean, it should be a given. And so this cross-learning is so important. So for our last few minutes, I am going to invite us to do a very small and short activity, shorter than I wanted. But I want you just to think for a moment about these 6 components, okay? I don't know if you can see them here, but again, the 6 are safety. If you have a notebook, you can write them in there. Safety, regulation, connection, identity, empowerment, and joy. Now, there's different things within each of these, right? Like in safety, we're talking about internal safety and relational safety and environmental safety. There's different aspects to each of these. But for sake of time, now I want you to think for a moment, which one or two of these is something that you would feel, this is something that maybe isn't going quite as well in my life right now as I would want. Like that there's something maybe that is creating a challenge. Maybe I'm having to move out of my apartment and I don't know if I'll find another one. It's creating this sense of insecurity in me. Maybe there's something to have to do with identity. You know, somebody's graduating from school and doesn't know where they're going to start now in their professional career and what this means and if there's even jobs, and it's creating some kind of distress. So just think for a moment if there's one or two of these areas that resonate for you. Yes, I'll say them once more. So safety, regulation, connection, identity, empowerment, and joy. And then if you have one or two of those, I invite you just to think, what does that look like for you? How is that area kind of affected right now? Why is it kind of challenging for you right now? Because this is your contextualization. This is your personal contextualization. Safety might look different for you personally right now than it does in an IDP camp in South Sudan somewhere. So what does it look like for you? And then also think for a moment, if you were to try and strengthen that or enhance it, what would you need? What are things that you can think, this, I would need this, or I would want more of this. This would somehow help me, or will help me, because hopefully you're going to do that in real life. And again, this is your personal contextualization. Is this making sense? So I think it's important that we see, you know, this idea of these concepts and how we contextualize them. It goes every way. This isn't something that's for Africa. This is something that's for everyone. Because we're all human beings, and these things affect all of us. I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah? Yeah. I think we'll stop there. And I think because of time, I think we're done at time. So in that case, I'm happy to answer questions outside. So if anyone has any, you can see the materials, you can ask me anything. Thank you so much for coming. And thanks to you guys.